Yeah, so we are doing days 16 to 20 this
16
time
to
around.
20. Yeah. And we did share some of these with you last time, but I think we have a few more. So I'm going to just really quickly share some of the new tastings we've added. I'm not going to repeat some of the old ones that we had up last week, but there are some cool things now in the pipeline, although we will rehash one of them. Our Doc Swinson's cask just came in today. So our latest exclusive
Mm.
bourbon cask. I know Evan and Harmony especially are excited. They went down to Washington State to pick that beauty out. Took 6 months, but it's finally here. So that's coming up. Lost in Translation, Japanese whiskey tasting. We're going to pit a couple of different Hibikis against each other, the 100th anniversary bottling and the regular plus a 21-year-old blend and some limited edition Nikas. There's going to be a Waterford tasting. Who with? We don't know, but someone is coming to Calgary to present Waterford at KWM. I'm hoping it's Ned. My fingers are crossed for that. The distillery manager, he is a legend, but time will tell. It'll still be a good range. There's port and chocolate. We're doing a virtual of the Bruichladdich tasting as promised. The Macbeth collection, Act 1. This is the date for the virtual tasting, and there's only 4 spots left. I don't know if we're going to be able to add many more than that unless we open a whole other bottle of each whiskey, which is unlikely. But that's a really cool collection, including like there's 31-year-old art. Maybe the Ardbeg's not that old, but there's some really cool old stuff in there. Won't dwell on it. New kids on the block, some newer Scottish distilleries, including Torveg, which is arriving in the new year, Holyrood, which has just arrived, the Herrick from Harris, which has just arrived. Nick Nean arrived a couple months back along with Inchdarney, aka Rylaw. So there's some cool things, including a couple single casks from our friend Andy from Rasse. And then rare and old. I think this is the last one we have on the lineup there. We've got whiskeys up to 50 years old in this tasting. So lots of cool things coming down the pipe in the new year. The link for that is on our website. I'm pretty sure everyone on this tasting knows where to find that, but in case not, it's in the chat. And Evan, today's whiskey is not a huge surprise to me
Hmm.
because we invited a special guest to be here to present the whiskey. And contrary to what Jeff suggested at the end of last week's tasting in the chat, it is not Walter. Walter is not the special guest for the tasting. But instead, we've got our friend Bryce Parsons from Bear Hill Brewing, Last Best, soon to be Moline Range, and some other things. We might need to let him explain to us not just about the whiskey, but where it came from and where it's going. So, Bryce, thanks for joining us tonight. While you're, I don't know if I've missed anything in the intro there that you want to add, but I'm going to crack open my calendar and fish out the bottle. But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Andrew and Evan, for inviting me. And wow, lots of people on these talks. This is my first one, that I've been on. So it's super exciting to speak with. I don't know. Maybe is this the highest echelon of whiskey
It's up there.
connoisseurs?
It's a breed apart, some might say.
Yeah, yeah, it might be. It's either the upper echelon or the lowest common denominator, or somewhere in between.
And are people who find most of our jokes humorous, or at least
Yeah,
enough to stick around. But yeah, no, we've got some whiskey folk, and I can just see from the picture here, we've got people in Ontario, BC, Alberta. Presumably there's someone from Quebec on there too. Safe bet. But yeah, no, we got people from all over Calgary, Northern Alberta, and humor is bottom rung, but there you go. Yeah, so Bryce,
Awesome.
I've known you now for a number of years. We made a few whiskeys, one of which nearly killed you in
Yeah.
the basement of Last Best. And most people don't realize, but that pub, brew pub, which is one of the best in the city, also has a distillery quietly tucked into a corner of it. And you made some whiskey there. You made some whiskey in Fort McMurray, and you're soon going to be making whiskey in Jasper as well.
Yeah. So yeah, Andrew, like I think we're nearly pushing 10 years, I think now. I don't think we have an official start date. I've been with the Bear Hill group for just over 9 years. However, though, friends before that as well.
Mhm.
I got into this industry roughly over 10 years ago. After having a very promising career in healthcare, and then deciding, I love this. Healthcare was fun, but I really love this as well. So I moved halfway across the world. Attended Harriet Watt, with the sole purpose of coming back and really starting to be an active member in developing, Alberta's whiskey scene.
Mhm.
Which takes a fairly long time there. So, I came back, got in the brewing, industry first. There wasn't really many distilleries around at that time. I remind everyone that actually small producers weren't even allowed in Alberta until 2013, until AGLC changed a ruling that allowed to be able to produce at a much lower level than what the minimums were. And so there it kind of took off. And at the time, the Bear Hill group, who started in Jasper and had as a brew pub company and expanded to Banff, had a brew pub in Wood Buffalo and right in Fort McMurray at the time, and was building Last Best in Calgary. They actually had I'd say the balls and the insight to put in a still in their Fort McMurray facility, which actually was never allowed to be hooked up for nearly 2 years, until this rule changed. Of course, when it changed, they were the first license under the new craft licensing rules. And, so we started, even before I was with the company, we actually started, making whiskey on it and seeing what we can do. And that's where the exploration started. That's soon, the attention soon shifted to Last Best, which opened up in 2014. Bigger still. So we went from a 230-liter still. We still produced in Wood Buffalo until it closed in 2019. However, we started producing at Last Best, and really kind of focusing, at the time, I think in the end, when we go where we go with this brand is where explorers making whiskey for explorers. I think that's a tone that we like to do. That kind of ties into the Western Canadian nature of things. Where we have our foundation and roots in the Rocky Mountains. When you look at the early explorers of the country, and on what they went through, and there is no doubt about it. We were influenced by beer at the time as well. So, we initially started to developing and designing this program without even the Moline concept even made up. It wasn't even a thought at that moment. We were making whiskey at the time, at a Last Best in Wood Buffalo, and seeing where we're going, and making whiskeys we're very passionate about, and delving into areas that we felt were interesting. We also, with my numerous connections throughout, the US and Europe, we really started kind of diving into this concept of an American single malt as well, and how we could do a Canadian riff on it. And as anyone knows who follows whiskey, that's the newest category that's coming out of the US now, and allows you to use specialty grains. So we kind of went on that and started making, a bunch of different things, collaborating with people. As Andrew had mentioned, we'd collaborated a while ago. It'd be actually, maybe I think a couple of weeks ago, it'd be about 7 years ago. And then, we kind of, narrowed down, our focus into, knowing that we're going to eventually start releasing this, and narrowing it down to, core expressions. So what you have in front of you is Tequera, is one of the core expressions that typically uses a roasted malt component in it, but it also uses a bit of Demerara sugar, because the initial whiskey, this is a component of two whiskeys, a kind of a straight up single malt whiskey, Alberta barley and malted in Alberta, mixed with a whiskey that was based off an imperial porter that Last Best made in its first year. So a small component of that imperial porter had demerara sugar in it. So we decided to keep it in there, and play with the 1/11th rule for Canada, and incorporate it, where we essentially are making, you could look at it in a way we're making whiskey, but then there's a small portion of rum that is mashed, fermented, distilled and aged alongside this whiskey, there. As far as branding goes, we for years and years and years we thought that we were going to release under Last Best. And as things have developed, we decided that we would go back to our roots. And once again, that we're explorers making whiskey for explorers, going back to our roots in Jasper. And we've acquired a building there that we're building out right now and offering a world-class whiskey experience. So that's going to be the Moline Range, and that's where that came from. So we shifted all our branding approach to be the Moline Range, and really what it allowed us to do is actually look outside of Last Best as well. I mentioned Wood Buffalo had closed in 2019, and so rather than just making out of Last Best, it allowed us to collaborate with other distilleries, especially Alberta distilleries, where we could go out there, collaborate with other Alberta producers. It's a very, very, the craft in small producer environment is still in its kind of infant or maybe toddler stage right now. So there is some of our fellow distillers that have excess capacity, and we decided to work with them, and that was very important with us, with everything kind of culminating or accumulating back to where our home is, which is Jasper. So we decided to name it the Moline Range, which is the series of as one of the major mountain ranges in Jasper National Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just put that back up there for a moment, because I mean the bottle kind of plays homage to that. It sort of looks like either the rippling of a mountain stream, or I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
ice.
that's exactly it. So we decided when we're going in this, when you decided to pick your packaging, a producer could easily look at a stock package. So you get a catalog of bottle shapes and sizes and such, and then obviously you have your free will to decorate it however you want with your labeling, and you get a couple choices with your closure, whether you do a screw top or a T closure, cork or synthetic, all these choices. However, what we decided, we've been waiting this long, and we wanted a packaging that would reflect what we're doing, and reflect the environment that we're in. And so we opted to do a fully custom bottle. We worked with a design team out of Brooklyn, New York. And really the creative direction was get familiar with Jasper and Jasper National Park. Obviously, a natural, kind of heavenly playground. So we wanted a real natural feel or organic feel to the bottle. So we decided to go with more of a squat bottle. However, as you see, there's like a rippling effect in the glass, and this, either represents, a flowing stream in the spring, or in the winter, ice as well. We decided to decorate it with coin, like a little brass coin in the middle that, not only it represents an M for Moline, however, though it also, highlights, a mountain range. And then the stopper is actually pretty cool. You can't see it, but you can see it on this bottle. It is a screw top, closure. However, though, it's encased with wood with a brass ring, and then decoration on top. I think, from what I've seen, this is one of the most beautiful, screw top closures I've ever seen. The team did a fantastic job on it. And we wanted something that would really kind of look and represent, definitely a premium product, but more importantly represent where we're from, and that kind of natural and organic nature that we hold dear.
Yeah, that's awesome, Bryce. Well, I want to say I love the screw closures.
Yeah.
Most of the premium Japanese whiskeys have like food safe plastic, dense, breathable, like tiny, slightly breathable like screw tops, and they're awesome. And nothing is more disappointing than a cork breaking or crumbling or drying out and your whiskey oxidizing. So I'm all over the screw tops.
Yeah, we're really happy with that decision, on it, that it turned out. Took a couple tries, to be honest with you,
Mhm.
but we have it nailed down. Right now we're just waiting for these bottles to land. They actually they're expected to land tomorrow into the port of Vancouver, and then we'll kick them over here and start filling.
Awesome.
Right
Well,
on.
Evan, let's talk about the whiskey quickly. You've already written it up. I know some people have put some notes in there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what do
So
you
there's
thought?
been mentions of what was it, jelly beans here, which I think is a really good one on the palate. It does sort of follow a little bit of what you get off a lot of American single malt, and even it's a two brewers in the Yukon in a really good manner, where it's got this sort of candied slash banana driven style on the nose, but it's got this great spice that comes through on the palate along with everything else that I really enjoy as well.
Well, and it's without the one signature note that a lot of American single malts have that I really strongly dislike, and it's like this
Mhm.
raw barnyardy, um, I don't know, like horse stable note. And
Mhm.
I think that's been a big turnoff for me with a lot of American single malt as opposed to Scottish single malt, is that it's so barnyardy and I don't like it.
Mhm.
Um, and Bryce, you're a distiller. You're kind of, well, you are the expert in the distilling side of things on this chat. Like, do you have a sense of what would be causing that? Like, why so many of them have that just intensely malty, like sort of barnyardy character?
Yeah, not knowing what everyone's kind of doing, I do have, and not suspicions, but there's theories where you'd kind of generally look. It could be yeast choice. I tend not to kind of think that, with the Americans. They're not too creative with yeast unless they're kind of getting into the brewing yeast. But even still, then I would look at some of their milling, yeah, that they're doing. If they're doing you know yeah, if they're doing fine milling or not, or grain on, fermentation rather than lautering.
Mhm.
One thing I find about my American comrades, like when you look at bourbon, is so dominant in American distilling that lautering isn't really, like, using a lauter ton, despite is done in brewing and distilling. There's a lot of there's not a lot of shared information between the two industries. So, typically an American setup, you'll just get you'll get a mash mixer, so all the grains just get pulverized and, put in there, and there's very little lautering. So it might be that, the grain on fermentation, that's there as well. Um, Outside of that, it could be going back to fermentation, a little bit higher temperature fermentation as well. They're trying to drive an ester profile.
Mhm.
For me, I keep it a little bit more tame. I keep it a little bit cooler, as well. Um, and that, I think, comes from more of the team at Last Best, being used to brewing, and not necessarily letting, free rise fermentations. We do a fairly controlled one, usually hotter than what we do with any beer or ale fermentations, but we tend to control the range of it. And down in the basement of Last Best, it's fairly consistent. So you don't really get a massive rise because it's inside, and you're usually sitting at an ambient temperature. And we have, glycol, insulated jackets on our fermenters, which sometimes, you don't have, in what I see in the US. So it could be a variety of factors. In maturation, I don't think so. The barnyardy stuff is coming from there
Mhm.
necessarily, unless you're using, like, for some reason, soggy oak and stuff. But I just don't see any distiller
Mhm.
really going, doing that, to be
Well,
honest with you.
I think one of the things, and Evan sort of touched on it, that we love about especially the two brewers whiskeys, which admittedly are all over the map. Like
Mhm.
they're not consistent, but they're usually good, or at the very least interesting. And I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that they're starting with a good beer that they're
Yeah.
then distilling. Like they've got their fermentation figured out. I guess is my point.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like the knowledge with brewing, and to be honest, like even when I went to Harriet Watt, you don't even touch a still until like 6 to 7 months in.
Mhm.
Because you have to learn brewing before you actually learn distilling. And it's not saying that distilling's easier. It's just they want to instill the foundation. And that's where if you have brewers on your team or people with brewing experience, especially with your mash people, it really starts off the process really well and knows where to troubleshoot, especially when you're using a louder tun or anything like that. And usually the fermentations are down. They know how to monitor fermentations a lot better rather than just letting a free rise and then sending it to the still. They know how to temper fermentations if needed. They know how to, if they're behind in production, if there's a pinch point at the stills, they could, especially with glycol jackets, you could not pause the fermentation, but when it's complete, you could, there's knowledge on how to cool the fermentation and getting it ready for, just to kind of buy and use some time, which, if you're straight up just in distillation, you just don't know that.
No, it's cool.
Uh,
Well,
Bryce, question regarding the ABV. Well, two questions. One, the 48% on the Takara here, is that something you see going through the lineup, like as a choice for alcohol level, or is it just a one-off for this one? And also
No,
with that, sorry,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Evan. Regarding
And also,
yeah, go ahead,
you
Evan.
go.
stop being so
Okay, and
polite.
also, yeah, yeah, this is the Canadian in us. So along with that, with this in the warehouse, was the ABV going up or down over time?
Yeah, both good questions. So roughly the 48%, that's, I kind of go through these and proof it down to a place that I do like, to sit at. I generally like whiskeys in that kind of mid 40s to high 40s range. Don't get me wrong, I like a nice barrel strength or, something, 50, low 50s as well. I think with this one in particular, and I think we'll see it mainly with our lineup, we'll probably sit at the usual bottling strength around that 48%. That leaves us some specialty releases that we can do at a higher percentage. One of the problems that we have here in Alberta, is when we get into cask strength stuff, the ABV actually goes up fairly significantly. So this whiskey actually, and even when we eventually all taste the Kensington wine market collab, the Excelsior, these whiskeys kind of get to the high 60s, if not 70%. Where it's so dry here, and especially if you have some, you're exposed to some dynamic aging, you're losing water at a more rapid rate than you are alcohol. So it's great as far as when you talk about the angel share. It's really, the angel share is sure is the total volume loss, but really the valuable part of that is the alcohol, and we're losing that at a lesser rate than in other regions. But I find here too, we tend to have, this is also a fairly like spicy whiskey, where, initially, at the higher percentage, I felt it just a bit abrasive initially. However, though, I'm tasting it right out of cask and kind of starting to blend it down, and it hasn't really mellowed out, with water, which it definitely softens up over time, it takes at least
Mhm.
3 4 weeks to do. So this has been, this has already, been in bottle for I think well over 4 weeks. So it's softening up, and I even have samples of this that I did, back nearly a year ago, that's even softened even more. But I generally lean to that kind of, that's a personal thing for me. So that's where I start. And then, I go from there, but it gives us some room, for other releases.
Right on. Well, I got to say, thank you for providing this for the calendar, and it was a ton of fun to write up and work with you guys on that to get the blog post done. But it's such a great combination of sweet and spice right now on the palate that it's just fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's soft fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, working with you guys over the years. And, and obviously seeing everyone that joins their tastings, and we highly look forward to kind of more coming out. We not only do we have the Takara coming out, but look for us in a couple years. We do have a moderately peated offering that we're going to be releasing as well. We're going to be playing with a fairly innovative type whiskey, once again kind of based off a beer that we do,
Cool.
that plays around with that 111th rule once again, and a couple other releases. Plus, we have a whole, like, our warehouse is just full of different things that we've, once again, we're explorers making whiskey for explorers. So what we're allowed to do in our Excelsior and our Kikeslin releases is released either, so Excelsior would be our like partnerships, collabs, it could be multi-barrel releases, and then Excelsior Reserve would be like our barrel pick of the year kind of thing. Founders Reserve, you can name it, all sorts of other things, but we're allowed to go back to these kind of exploratory whiskeys that we're able to allow them to come to a respectable age and just see where they go. If it takes 10 years for a certain grain bill or mash bill that we did, or a technique we did, say we purposely wanted to make it a cloudy wash, for example, which if anyone's familiar with Bunnahabhain, they typically do a cloudier wash, but it does take a little bit of time to age something like that. We can, and that's one thing that we're very proud of, is that we have waited, Takara, we don't put an age statement on, but this whiskey here is anywhere between, is the two whiskeys are 5 and 7 years old. And that's
Cool.
generally the pocket that we are going to be liking to release stuff in. We from the beginning there, we never wanted to be a producer that hit 3 days in a year, or 3 years in a day, and then all of a sudden, oh, it's whiskey, let's release it.
Or
We just didn't see the point.
or not even 3 years and just calling it single malt and just leaving the word whiskey off.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite
Yeah.
disingenuous. But
We're highly bought in, of wanting to be leaders of, building wonderful brands out of Alberta. And there's other comrades that we have and distilleries that are building up, and we're very impressed with the investment that's going on, and that we're all very like-minded people, and we just want to be leaders of that.
That's
Right on.
Well, Bryce, really appreciate you being here with us tonight. As Evan said, it was really cool to be able to put something really unique in the calendar that truly almost no one has tasted up until this point. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing those bottles hit the shelves in the months ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate it. Yeah, there really hasn't been many people that have tasted this, actually. I keep this stuff pretty close to my chest, actually, and if it's everyone here, and then we did a tasting back in September, a pre-tasting with some of our investors. There's about maybe 26 of them there, and that's really it.
So
Very neat.
Well, quite a privilege. So thanks for that, Bryce. All right, Evan, we got 4 more whiskeys to wind over here. So I'm going to pop open door 17. I think that's the next one, right?
Yep.
What have we got here? We've got Speyburn 15. Tell me about the Speyburn 15. I was actually there recently. And
and they so did they have were they touring when you were there last time?
No, I got an advanced preview of the distillery. So but they've done an incredible job, and it's kind of a cool, I'll just say it really quickly. The employees at the distillery during their silent season were basically given the opportunity to clean up and restore and make it a touristy site. And the cool thing about that is they've done some really interesting things in there that perhaps a marketing team wouldn't have thought of. It looks cool. It's a beautiful distillery. Bizarrely, I found the other day at some point, probably Lucas or Gordon Stevenson gave me a print of the distillery. It's in my office. It should really
Mhm.
be framed and on the wall somewhere. But yeah, they've opened for tours, and they've got a decommissioned drum maltings in there, which you don't get
Mhm.
to see almost anywhere. But what's cool about it is it literally looks like the workers just dropped their tools and went home one day, because there's still a bag to collect the little roots, the chits that fall off the barley. It looks like someone just turned off the lights and walked away.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
like,
this is a really cool whiskey. So we did have a Speyburn last year, and we might have had some previous. I'd have to take a look. I can't remember if we had a Cadenhead way back or anything like that. But Speyburn distillery wise, you look at their website, and the picture that they have up their website, I find hilarious because it's a bunch of forest and then a couple pagoda roofs like kind of sticking out. So last year when I wrote it up when we did the boutique whiskey company version, I put a picture of Waldo in behind some of the trees and just said that Waldo was more easy to find than the distillery itself from that. But we've had a single cast from these guys. It's kind of an underrated distillery, especially for the company that has it even. Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
But it's making some really good whiskey. It's owned by the same company that also owns, what is it, Knockdhu, Belminick, Old Pulteney, Bell Blair, I think as well.
Mhm.
So it's bigger production than all those guys, Speyburn, but uh, is finally kind of like getting more public attention now that they do have the distillery open for tours and everything as well.
Um, yeah, Speyburn, I agree with you. I think it's an under appreciated distillery. I think a lot of that owes to the way it was presented for the longest time. Like, I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember, there was like a dirt cheap Speyburn 10-year in a
Yep.
crappy tin, and then it disappeared for a while, and they rebranded and launched. But I don't know that the distillery got the support it needed when they relaunched. It also happened
Hmm.
just before COVID, so any momentum they might have had went out the window. But yeah, the new range, the 12, 15, 18 are all great. You know,
Yeah.
we had to get talked into buying a cask of it. And in the end, only did half a cask, which I still sort of regret. It was that really lush, sweet bourbon barrel.
Hmm.
It was a 15-year-old. And I think my logic was, and it was wrong, was no one's going to want this because they don't know what Speyburn is. No,
Yeah.
there's no, what's the draw to this for the consumer? And it sold out in about 6 weeks. And of course, we should have bought the whole cask, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. It is one of the Speyside distilleries that has uh, potentially the most generic name that you could actually put on a distillery, which doesn't help it.
Mhm.
Um, Also, that doesn't help that there's multiple distilleries that do start with Spey
Well,
as well.
it could be worse. They could have called themselves Speyside Distillery, which is a place.
Yeah,
Uh,
spoiler, because we will get there. But
yeah. Um, but yeah, it's lush, it's creamy, there's some nice spice. When I first tasted it, there was a nice sort of musty, dunnage,
mhm,
oaky tone coming through it. Um, they've got a nice bar slash visitor center. It's just in Rothes, like not far from Glen Rothes Distillery, from Glen
mhm.
Grant, just off the highway that leads south from Elgin into the Speyside proper. And yeah, it's a charming little distillery, and I think it's got, a lot of potential.
Yeah. Yeah, and as Andrew said, I agree. The 15 and the 18 are really good. Still don't necessarily get the love consumer wise that they should. And even for us selling it, sometimes they get looked over like we know they're good, but it's they just don't jump off the shelves as quickly as they should.
But 46% non-chill
Yep.
filtered, characterful, uh,
Hmm.
yeah, good bang for buck. Like,
Yep.
what is the Speyburn 15 run, Evan?
It's 110 currently.
110. So, compared to most other distilleries at that age and at 46%, that's pretty decent. So,
Hmm.
a nice little dram. Now, not wanting to rush things along too long, but trying to be conscious of time. Um,
Mm.
Any other thoughts on that? We will come back through and do our speed round where we see
Yeah.
how the
I'll
whiskey.
read out what other people have said if you want to grab your next bottle there.
Got
So
it.
Tom and Vi, Viola say sweet butter and lovely malt on the Spearburn Does. Totally agree. Love that sort of maltiness that comes through. Clinton Renata say rummed fruit on the nose, oak and wine notes. It does have a bit of wine, more on the sherry side of things. Really nice finish of like a mocha or chocolate fudge note for me on the palate, which I really enjoy.
All right. And now, day 18, we're on to the Armoric Une Illes Breton French single malt. And we're bottled here, what is that, 46?
Yep. Yeah, so 46% alcohol in this guy. This is from Waringham Distillery in Brittany, Brittany in France. And we have had a bottling from them in the past from the, pardon me, in our whiskey calendar. I think it was in 2018 or 2019.
Yeah, it was the unpeated.
This is the first peated whiskey that we've had from them, from what I recall. And we only got mini bottles of it. We never got the full size. So we had to sacrifice a lot of minis to get these in here.
To be fair,
yes,
and the gentleman should perhaps, fess up. This is a whiskey that came late last year for last year's calendar. It was one of 7 whiskeys that were late. And the buffer was only 6. So we had to scramble. And the filler last year was that Douglas Distillery bottling of the KWM cask that our friend
75%er.
Yeah, that Steve Lee rush bottled and got out to us so we could finish the calendar. Because this arrived, I think, mid-December, which wouldn't have worked for building calendars and distributing them. So we had it left over and 600-ish of them lying about. So we had an eye to putting it in the calendar regardless, but partly because, everything we've ever had from Armoric is great. The problem is nobody wants it because it's French single malt, I think is the biggest knock on it. And maybe the branding isn't always, what it could be, but I've been impressed with the whiskeys from Armoric in the past, and young peated single malt from France seemed interesting. So that's why we ordered it. And you're right. We were supposed to get full-size bottles of this last year in addition to the minis, but I don't think those ever came.
No, not that I'm aware of. But this one is, I'm glad we put it in the calendar because man, is it well done. I was really impressed when I did the tasting notes on this. It's quite clean, 50 ppm, if I remember correctly, for the peat spec. But peated malted barley was imported from Scotland for this and then distilled at their own distillery in Waringham Distillery. But clean, peaty, a little bit of fruit in there, and just really well balanced, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, look at the color of this thing. It's extremely, this is a spirit-driven whiskey. It's not hanging its hat on the wood that it matured in.
No, not at all.
It's soft malt. There's a nice ashy, it's a fairly boldly peated malt, but it's not medicinal. It's not rough. It's, as you said, it's got a nice balance. And I actually think there's a fair bit of fruit in there, and that's that spirit fruit and or maybe a bit of esterification with the pine in the wood. It's very tasty.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, it kind of reminds me of Ben Romeck's Peat Smoke, stylistically, where you get a lot of the grain in there. You get just a hint of bourbon cask without it being over the top, and then those nice fruit notes as well.
Oh yeah, lots of nice fruit on the palate. Starting to get a bit more on the tarry side of things with the peat, but it's light, lush, creamy. I like the malt in that. It's interesting. I don't know that you'd want to mature that for a long time, especially in something like sherry, because I think you'd lose all those lovely like tones of peat and malt.
Yeah, as Jeff says, reminds me of a good English whiskey company bottling. Yeah, it does have an English whiskey company. It doesn't come far off this too, which is really cool.
Yeah, and they're interesting things to look at. I think the problem, and this is what we've run into with a lot of these distilleries from other countries, even when they're good, is they're craft distillery priced. And I guess people are always looking at the comparatives, like what can I buy that's proper single malt Scotch? And you know,
Mhm.
Wee Beastie runs what, $75? That's 75,
Mhm.
$80. That's like a hard price to beat for a lot of other distilleries if you're trying to compete with peated Scottish malt.
Yep. So yeah, for this one, we do have mini bottles of it still available. It's $11.99 for the minis. Um, yeah, maybe we'll see size bottles of it. I kind of doubt it though. I think this was sort of a limited release that they did, but hopefully we see more peated whiskey released from them in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, it's been a while since I've looked in the catalog, but like other than Cornog, there's not a lot of options for French whiskey these days. And
Hmm.
good as Cornog is, the prices on it are just eye-watering.
Yep.
So just it doesn't really work. But just doing a quick scan of it to see what's there. And Armoric has classic double matured and sherry cask in the market.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we might have to try one of those again at some point here, but
Hmm.
not just yet. At least there's always Beaujolais. Oh man,
Yeah.
no thanks. And well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Beaujolais Nouveau, no thanks.
Yeah.
Beaujolais proper, yeah, I
Bring it
guess.
on.
Where are we at now? Day 19?
Yep. Day 19.
Yeah. So few windows left to open. It's like the kid when you're running out of presents to open and you're like, oh man, there better be something good here.
Yep.
Uh, Single Malts of Scotland, Speyside Distillery, 25-year. Now, this is the one that's properly Speyside Distillery and not a Speyside Distillery, right?
It is.
Yeah. All
So
right.
yeah, this is from the even more generic name for Speyside Distillery, which is the Speyside Distillery, which is owned by Speyside Distillers. To make it even more generic, um, young distillery. It's only been started up in 1990, if I remember correctly, and it's I don't know if it was built this way on purpose. It probably was, but it is the very definition of quaint Scottish distillery without having more age to it. Um, it looks like it was put in an old mill where they've got a water wheel out front and so on and so forth. Very tiny production wise. The distillery itself was even used for the set of a distillery on a TV show for a little bit as well, if I remember correctly. That aired on BBC.
Are you referring to this sort of bucolic photo here?
Yeah,
It looks like something that would be on that show Outlander. I've never seen it.
yeah.
Uh, I know they use that show to shill a blended whiskey.
Yeah,
Um,
the two protagonists would be making out in front of it or something, I'm sure.
hey, bodice ripper. That's what you got to give the people what they want.
That's
Um,
right.
Now, yeah, the Speyside Distillery is interesting. Now, I love this whiskey. We were lucky to get this as an exclusive in Canada, which is one of the reasons why we had to
Hmm.
put it into the calendar this year. And the reason I was really keen to get it was Sean and I last fall were at the Whiskey Show London. We're loving it. Lily and Chris told us it was coming to Calgary. So I basically asked Michelle and Pacific, I said, look, I know this is coming. I really want it as an exclusive. And we were lucky to get it because it's like silky and decadent and fruity and very, very pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, Clinton Run Odyssey, apple pie, old oak, plums, long warming finish. Yeah, the sort of sweet apple notes and even into lychee there for me on the palate.
Mhm.
Uh Fantastic and juicy whiskey in style.
Oh, the palate on that, it's got a really nice, like old school feel to it. Not in the sense of like just that it's old, but this is kind of to me what reminds me of what like good old whiskeys used to taste like, especially
Yeah.
from ex-bourbon. And it's also frankly night and day from what the distillery puts out itself,
Yeah.
which is just I mean, a few of them were good, but a lot of them weren't, and their packaging for the distillery bottle.
Oh, the infuriatingly tall bottles. I actually poked fun at that in the blog post. I don't know if you saw it, but I made this graphic just to give everybody an idea of the scale of the bottle. It is stupidly tall. That's the Burj Khalifa there on the side, just to give you an idea of how big it
Which
is.
also doesn't
And
go
there's
on the
your
shelf.
regular Octomore bottle and a little Glenfiddich 15 there. But
Yeah.
yeah, just it's the reason we don't carry it and or didn't carry it in a lot of cases because it would end up so high that it would just get lost
Well, it was
by
also,
people.
to be fair, the other reason was that the branding is just like, I don't know. It's like a Scottish grandmother's, upstairs like bedroom carpet, like tartan. They
Yeah,
overplay the tartan bit. I mean, the packaging is busy. It doesn't look like Scotch,
yeah,
and they don't seem to care. Maybe they're selling it all. I don't know, but like for the longest time they were making a big deal about how they had some partnership with an over the hill English footballer. Like that was their marketing strategy. And like maybe in the UK that might work, but in the rest of the world, no one's going to buy your single malt because some soccer player who's now 70 they've never heard of before,
yeah.
was once a big deal. So anyway, this is lovely. It's juicy.
Mhm.
Uh, we don't have much of this left. I think there's like 5 or 6 bottles of this left, and then it's
Yeah,
gone forever.
yeah. Fantastic, fantastic whiskey. Nice bit of coconut and chocolate again at the finish there for me right now.
Yeah, coconut. There's some beeswax in there too. Um, Fresh, toasty, just all around. It's got a lot of nice layers to it. So yeah, single malts of Scotland, for those who don't know, comes from Elixir Distillers. They do both single casks and marriages, and this was a marriage bottling where they
Hmm.
marry together a number of different casks, 3X bourbon hogsheads in this case, 52.6%. And yeah, we have confusingly another single malts of Scotland marriage coming in a few weeks' time. It's a 31-year-old Speyside whiskey, but this time it's from a Speyside distillery. It's not a Speyside distillery, but you can see how this all gets very confusing if you don't notice
Yeah,
the way the words are arranged. Because, God, why would you name your distillery Spey? I mean, there would be like opening a distillery on Isla and calling it Isla Distillery,
yeah,
or
exactly.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. What's your favorite whiskey? Oh, Highland. I love Highland Scotch.
well, there's a meme out there amongst whiskey folk where, um, I think it was the people from Speyside Distillery trying to tell people where their whiskey was from. They're like, no, I know you said the Speyside, but which distillery?
Yeah, it's
Speyside.
like the who's on first, what's on second. Yeah.
It just keeps going in an infinity loop. All right, one more, right? Day 20. Uh,
Yep.
Crack the window, and then we've got time for the speed rounds.
Hmm.
Uh, Day 20, what do we have? Oh, another one I blurted out earlier. Ardbeg Wheat Beastie. Um, there we go. We've actually wanted to put this in the calendar for about
Yeah.
4 or 5 years, but they couldn't, like they kept saying maybe next year we can do minis of it, maybe next year. And next year never came. And then this year we took matters into our own hands and threw the beastie
Yeah,
in.
it was a little bit too bad because Ardbeg has been pretty good about doing many bottles of their entire regular line. I think they even did one for the Anno, didn't we? Didn't we have that in last calendar? Maybe I'm wrong.
I think we've
But
done them all.
yeah, so we've had the 10, we've had the Ugadel, we've had Corey Brecken in there over the years, and we are big fans of, well, maybe not me as much, but that's because I like to be counterculture. But Andrew and Kurt are very, very big fans of Ardbeg, especially Kurt. And their regular line is fantastic. And I think the 5-year-old, the Wee Beastie, is actually a pretty good entry level to that lineup as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you're much more fond of another Ard distillery that's
That's
not.
right.
Um, yeah, it's immediately medicinal, which is not always the case with Ardbeg. And I think part of that is we're talking about a really young whiskey here. It's bottled intentionally young because they really wanted to accentuate that peaty profile. And I mean, this is something that I've been telling people for years, frankly, since Kilhoman came out, that like
Hmm.
if you want something to be peaty and smoky, you need to drink it young. And I have a good friend, Harry, who for the longest time was always hearkening back. He thought Ardbeg 17 was the greatest thing he ever had. And he loves Ardbeg. He liked the Supernovas. But anytime there was like a more mature bottling, like the 19, or even the 25, which I think he tried recently, he thinks they're total shit because he's chasing that really
The
intense
dragon.
raw
Yeah.
peat smoke. And the older the whiskey gets, the more that fades and the more it mellows.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we're all as whiskey fans definitely guilty of chasing the dragon every now and then, and trying to get that something similar to that bottle we had years and years ago. And it is frustrating when you can't even come close in a lot of ways, but
You mean like a
you're tasting
gooey,
it through rose tinted glasses at that point too. So
like a gooey Ben Nevis,
yeah.
20 something at $180. Pining for times. So I got one interesting note on here right off the bat, and it was kind of like a chicken noodle soup or like a beef bouillon note coming off the nose. Like there's a nice sort of beefy, like saucy meatiness to this.
Yeah, it definitely has a nice richness to it.
Mhm. And the palate, there's some nice citrus tones in there, firm smoke. It's salty, briny,
Yeah.
and
Tom
fruity.
and Viola say sweet ash. It
Mhm.
does have that nice, like, it's something I love off Isla whiskeys is where you get that creamy ashiness to it.
Mhm. Now, um, we probably should go back and do our speed rounds, but actually
Hmm.
try to make it speedy this time. Sometimes we get
Yeah.
our wheels stuck in the mud. Because we gotta run a poll and get ready to do another tasting in 35 minutes. Um, back to the Moline Takara. Um, it's very soft. It's going into like Flintstone vitamin notes for me on the nose now.
Oh, good call. Yeah. Yeah, I can see where you're going there. Yeah, that chalkiness even is there.
And
A
those
little
like
bit of baking chocolate too.
that dusty dipstick candy, the
Hmm.
that sort of powdered fruit candy.
Yeah, I was thinking the Valentine's hearts that you used to get.
Or rockets.
Hmm.
The palate's got it's got an interesting sort of like piney edge to it that I didn't
Yep.
really pick up before. The spices are there, the fruits there. I think that's got to be that little bit of Demerara that's in there. That's kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah, I was
a
thinking
bit
that.
of a sort of dark molasses hit.
Yeah, I meant to ask Bryce about what he felt the Demerara brought, but I like I see it giving it a sweet tanginess and a bit more weight, which I like.
Well, and it's interesting that they're using this now as kind of a component in the blending of their creation of their whiskey because I
Hmm.
remember trying it as new make, and I remember trying it as very young spirit in the wood. I know Bryce was super proud of it, and um, he loved that it created this like Tootsie Roll like flavor profile. And but the interesting thing was, and I think this shows how the industry has changed and how regulators have changed. I know one of the things he was battling with was with customs and excise because they're like, well, it's not whiskey and it's not rum. What do we call it? And he's like, well,
Yep.
can't we just figure that out later? And
Yep.
that must have been where they got to on this. But yeah, really interesting component. I hope they bottle that all on its own at some point too. Uh,
Hmm.
anyway, Speyburn 15.
Yeah. Love the sort of raisins and fudge that you get off this still on the nose.
It's like a damp bag of jujubes. Like when you open a
Hmm.
really fresh bag of jujubes, and there's which I haven't done in years because I'm an adult now and I don't eat candy, but I can think back on times when I did, and they're still fresh and they're like a little bit sticky.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about because I steal my kids' candy to hopefully save their teeth, is what I'm telling myself. But
You're you're doing God's work, Evan.
that's right.
Um, Palate fruity, toasty, nice little bit of spice there. Um, very drinkable.
Mm. Yeah, really, really well put together whiskey.
All right. The Armoric,
Armoric?
Ewan Illes Breton. Hey, did you figure out what Ewan Illes are all about?
No, I forgot to Google that one.
well, we have our fact checker on here tonight. Maybe Jeff will figure it out before we wrap.
Yeah. Don't let us down, Jeff. Great sort of dryer sheets meets chlorine pool note right now for me on the nose.
Yeah, it'd be like, yeah, the dryer sheets are an interesting note. Like if you were to like burn peat and filter that through a fresh dryer sheet.
Yep, that's right.
That would
It's the dirt
probably
you
not be
can
good
just
for-
never get out is peat. So
yeah, interesting. Okay. Speyside, 25-year-old Speyside distillery, not a Speyside distillery.
the Speyside.
Yeah. Maybe that's what they got to put on here is the Speyside distillery.
Yeah.
But then
Because everything else is an imitation.
But then people might think you're alluding to Glenfarclas, or because
Yeah.
all those other ones were like
Speyside's finest. Yeah.
probably Speyside's finest distillery. Yeah. Anyway, you can't win. Yeah, that's still a banger. So
Mhm.
easy drinking, soft, fruity, loads of beeswax and honeycomb.
Yeah,
And some
beeswax
nice
is gone.
floral tones. Very, very pretty. All right. Ardbeg. Wee Beastie, the not so wee Ardbeg.
Yeah, this is a little bit more like oily and more fermenty, I guess, if that makes sense, versus the Armoric.
Oh, Paul in Cornwall figured this out for us. A Celtic legend based on around a French peat bog.
Nice.
Romantic. I wonder if that's like got something to do with that Asterix guy or whatever. And
Well, he was in Gaul, not which is not too far from Brittany, I
oh,
guess.
but the
So,
Gauls and the Celts famously fought each other. So
yeah.
maybe he dropped it into the mud and it caused a whole thing.
Yeah.
You never know.
I read most of the Asterix series as a kid, and I just assumed based on that Gaul fought everybody.
They fought each other. That's
Yep.
that's how Caesar conquered them. He divided and conquered. Tarry, ashy, salty. It's great. It's not for wee boys, as they say. All right, are you gonna fire up the poll for us there, Evan?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Someone's copied a novel into the chat. Yeah. He instructed young Jobic to guide the dog towards the underworld gates. Oh, Jobic. So Evan, while people are voting here, have you reflected upon and chosen your three favorites from the lineup tonight?
It's a toughie. It's kind of a fun lineup to do. I mean, beyond the Wee Beastie, everything's kind of either unknown or unrequited in a way, where they just don't get the love that they deserve. Because of that, I'm going to stick to the unknown and unrequited. Everybody knows Ardbeg. I'm going to stay. My number one is the Speyside 25, and beyond that, I'm taking the Moline just because it was so much fun to try and so much fun to write up. If I'm doing a third, I'm taking the Armoric.
Very cool. And
how about you, man?
I thought we were gonna for once be like in sync on this, and it started out really promising. That Speyside 25 is definitely my favorite. Knowing what we've had so far and what's coming, it's probably in my top 3 in the entire calendar this year. And when I say knowing what's coming, I actually don't remember what's coming other than one bottling. So it's still going to be mostly a surprise for me. My number 2 is that Speyburn 15. I think that drinks really well. You know, I kind of half regret not putting the 18 in, but like then we would have had to charge slightly more. But I think the 15 is like a good introduction to the distillery and also at a really good price point for people. And then my number 3 is the Moline Range Takara. I think it's a really cool sign of what's coming. Yeah, I've been, as Bryce said, like I helped make the first whiskey with him. We've got a couple in cask, just about 7 or a little over 7 years ago now. And it's just exciting to kind of see that finally come to fruition, and to see that they've now got actual whiskey and things that we're going to start seeing over the next couple of years is really exciting. But I genuinely think it's an interesting product. And, I think I've been saying this for a long time. I think what Bryce was making at Last Best is some of the best spirit being made in Canada by a craft distillery. And he's got an interesting take on it. Like, he's not just trying to replicate Scotch whiskey. He's not just trying to do what the Canadian whiskey industry of old has done. He's doing something a little different. And I think that's really cool.
Well, and speaking of you partnering with distillers and stuff like that, we do have a barrel that needs to be filled now.
Oh, you mean like refill this one? Oh, you mean
Yeah.
the Doc Swinson's cask? Oh yeah, we better
Yes.
we better think about that. Well, one other fun project that we did with Last Best and with Bryce was, we once upon a time we made a stout with them that we put into.
Yeah.
Was that like was that one of the Jefferson casks, maybe like the Jefferson Ocean or something?
Yeah, that sounds about right. That was a pretty good stout too.
And we forgot about it. Well, not really. We sort of forgot about it for about 6 months, and then I started asking them about it, and they were so busy. They're like, "Oh yeah, it's good. We'll check on it later." And then I'd get busy and forgotten. Like, it was 13 months in the cask by the time we bottled it, and I was like, "Oh, there's no way this is going to be any good." But it ended up being a pretty damn good beer, and I think I still have 1 or 2 bottles of that kicking around. Fun times. So, Evan, how did it go in the voting tonight?
Yeah, so first, for the first favorite, the SMOS or SMOS Speyside is by far the favorite, 14 out of the 24 votes. Armoric didn't get any love in that round, but the Moline got 5 votes, Speyburn 15 got 3, and then the Wee Beastie got 2. Second favorite, the Moline took it with 7 votes. Tied for second place would be the Armoric all of a sudden coming out of nowhere, which is pretty cool, and the SMOS Speyside. Followed by a tie with 3 votes by the Speyside or Speyburn, pardon me, not Speyside, and the Wee Beastie.
Cool. I was trying to figure out. Oh, finally, I got it to work. I was trying to figure out. Someone asked what the pricing on the Moline is going to be, the Takara when it comes out, and I don't know if this is going to be 100%, but I would say somewhere between like 110 and 115. Based on pricing that I'd seen previously. So that's a best guess of where it's gonna fall.
And we're still thinking mid-January on that one?
Well, I'm not sure when that one's going to be released. When I spoke to Bryce about this last, the collab I did with him, that my feeling was that was possibly going to get released first, but they might have changed their mind. So, to be honest, I don't know. It may be then or February, March, but it's coming early this year would be the best way to put it.
Yeah, so we don't have anything up pre-order page-wise on our site yet, but just email evan@kensingtonwinemarket.com. I put that in the blog post as well. I will attempt to keep you guys apprised of when that is coming in and get you the final pricing on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Evan, anything else we want to quickly mention before we wrap?
No, I think we better leave it at that, since we gotta flip the table and get ready for the next tasting.
Yeah. I do want to say a quick note. If you didn't already notice, the next tasting we are doing is December 27th, same time, same bat channel. Until then, everybody, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. And if you are planning to come down to the shop, note we do close Christmas Eve at, I think, 4.
Yeah, that's
and
what we have is 4 o'clock.
We're closed Christmas Day and Boxing Day because I don't want to work Boxing Day, so I'm not going to make my staff work Boxing Day. So we'll see you after that. So yeah, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you on the other side, everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody.
And one last quick thank you to Bryce for making some
totally
here tonight too. So, all right, see you in 7 days.
Yeah, cheers, guys.